Good evening to our friends in Hong Kong and Asia, and good morning to our friends in England and Europe. Good morning, Orange. This is Rebecca. I'm the chair lady of the Social Enterprise Summit in Hong Kong. Every year, we are very excited to host master classes with leading thinkers and practitioners across different disciplines to transform our thinking and imagination and to put theory into practice. As we are rebuilding our cities after the pandemic, we need to step up to shape positive change, and business has a vital role to play in developing the social, environmental, as well as economic well-being of our community. And this is the main theme of this year's Social Enterprise Summit. We have explored different ways to ensure sustainable well-being with different sectors at the International Symposium held 2 weeks ago. While the 20th century was stuck in economic models, old economic models, I should say, and modes of business that are destroying the planet and increasing inequality, the 21st century calls for a new way of business that better serves our communities within the planet's boundaries, rather than the endless pursuit of profit. The Doughnut Economics offers a vision of what it means for humanity to thrive in the 21st century, and a pathway to meet the needs of all people within the means of the planet. So this evening, I'm very pleased to have Mr. Arvind Shahan, the Business and Enterprise Lead of the Doughnut Economics Action Lab, with us today. I met Arvind earlier this year in Oxford and was most impressed with his workshop on Doughnut Economics for Business. In fact, Arvind is the most ideal candidate to host this workshop because his background spans across business, government, social enterprise, and NGOs. Most recently, he was the chief executive of the World Fair Trade Organization, which is a global network of social enterprise and cooperatives that practice fair trade. Previously, he had spent 7 years at Oxfam, leading campaign and advocacy initiatives. He has also worked at Procter & Gamble as a market strategy manager. Arvind also speaks and writes regularly on cooperatives, social enterprises, and business for social good. So in this workshop, Arvind will lead us to turn theory into transformative action and how companies can make use of tangible design elements to bring humanity into the doughnut, the space that is both ecologically safe and socially just, and in which all can thrive. Yesterday was the Global Doughnut Day, when communities around the world were brought together around Doughnut Economics. So I'd like to thank Arvind to bring this important workshop to Hong Kong for us to learn, connect with him, and be inspired by him. So before we start the workshop, let's grab this rare chance to take a group photo together with Arvind. So will participants please turn on your camera with a broad smile? Our colleagues will take the photo for us. Ready? 1, 2, 3. I see cameras are turning up now. 1, 2, 3. Cheers. Let's take one more photo. I have a donut with me as dessert for me tonight. Okay, let's take one more photo. 1, 2, 3. Cheers. All right. So without further ado, I shall pass the floor to Arvind while I enjoy this delicious donut behind the screen. Over to you, Arvind.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I hope everyone can hear me. So we're going to spend most of the next 2 hours together, and what we're going to do is go through essentially what Doughnut Economics is, a very brief introduction, what Doughnut Economics means for the world of business in particular, and ways that we will need to transform and engage with what we call the deep design of our businesses to pursue this. So I am going to share my screen and have a little bit of an introduction first. Let me get my screen sharing on. we'll have plenty of time for questions and discussions as well as we go through this. So I'm going to present first on Doughnut Economics and a little bit on what it means that might be relevant. I see a hand up. Betty, are you wanting to ask a question at the moment, or is that a hand from something else?
Oh no,
No?
I think it's just from waving earlier. So.
Okay, no problem at all. No problem at all. So what we're going to do is firstly give a bit of an introduction about why the donut came to being. For those that aren't familiar, it was essentially a little bit of a reaction to the crises of the 21st century. We had the financial meltdown in 2008. We've had increasing climate breakdowns. When people stand up for the rights of nature around the world, we've had protest crackdowns, and we also, all of us, went through the various COVID lockdowns. All of these crises have put strains on our economies, on our societies, and on the living world. And they also relate to each other and have been caused partly with our relationship with the living world. So in response, what my colleague, Kate Rayworth, created and helped define is a compass for thriving, which looks like a donut. What she did is she worked with the ideas of planetary boundaries that already are well established among Earth system scientists that have said that, look, there are 9 Earth system boundaries that we must not transgress. We must stay within these boundaries to live in a safe space for humanity. These are all, I'm sure, very familiar to you, from climate change to biodiversity loss to fresh water withdrawals, air pollution. These are things that we must not transgress, but also they have relationships with each other. So we must stay within those, not overshoot those planetary boundaries. And at the same time, we must stay within the social foundation, so not fall short on life's essentials for everybody on this planet, for the millions of people who are currently falling short. We must reverse this. So we need the essentials of life: water, food, income, work, housing, all of the things that our economy helps provide. So we must not grow the economy beyond the living capacity of the planet, nor allow it to shrink within and below the social foundation. And it's between these two boundaries that there is that safe and just space for humanity. And that space is both ecologically regenerative and socially distributive. But we are falling short. We are in overshoot of most of this planet's boundaries, and we are also falling short on life's essentials. This is an alarming picture. All of this red tells us that something needs to change, and needs to change effectively. We all just took a collective selfie, but perhaps this picture is the collective selfie for our planet, for all of us living on this earth. And if we look at it from a national picture, we get a very similar perspective, where essentially we see the richer, higher income countries of this world, in particular, in significant overshoot on on planetary boundaries in order to meet much of the people's life essentials. So that model of higher income countries, their economic model and the industrial model, is not one that is a picture of development. It's a picture of being out of balance. We're also seeing many countries that have been called middle income countries, emerging economies like China, India, Brazil, Turkey, where I'm from, being also following a similar path, where already they are overshooting their fair share of the planetary boundaries. The lowest income countries like Malawi, are actually not using anywhere near their fair share of the Earth's planetary boundaries, but they are falling short even more on life's essentials. So the social goals are not being met at an even greater rate. So there is something that is repeated as a story across all the world's countries. There is no country that is within the donut. The country that comes closest is Costa Rica, but overall, there's no country within it, and every country is a developing country now. Every country is in need of redeveloping their economies to help them get into the donut. and what's caused this, what's behind it. And this is where we start to pivot towards what does all of this mean for the world of business. It's that degenerative linear model of take, make, use, lose, where we take from Earth its resources, we use them, then we lose them, and we repeat and repeat and repeat. We take stuff, we make it into things, we use those things, and we lose them. And this picture is one that is a significant part of those reds that you're seeing, particularly on overshoot of planetary boundaries. But there is hope, because alternatives are already emerging. We're already beginning to see that moving away from the degenerative model is possible. And it's about getting into a regenerative model that works with and within the cycles of the living world, where biological materials, for instance, are regenerating, are going back into the systems of life on this planet. And technical materials, the materials we make as humans, well, they're being restored and reused and minimized. The waste is minimized in both of those categories. And that diagram you see on the right-hand side is essentially a simplified version of the circular economy diagram, if you know that. But let's go a little bit deeper. What do we mean? What does that mean in practice? Because it's not just about circularity, it's also about concepts such as biomimicry. And these concepts can play out in the real world. So if you think about, for instance, agriculture, we know that there's a huge amount of landscape degradation where people have cut down forests in order to grow often feed for livestock or to graze livestock, or monocrop farming. Increasingly, there's an effort to reduce that harm, to get to a sustainable, what's called a sustainable world of zero deforestation. Let's stop the harm we're doing, let's stop the deforestation. But we've done already a lot of harm, and we need to now restore landscapes. We need to repair the damage we've done. And that's where landscape restoration, for instance, is an example of being regenerative. The other way to think about this is that nature doesn't do zero harm. It doesn't do, getting just zero deforestation. Nature regenerates, right? Nature creates benefits. So if you think about the building you're in right now, we're all in probably some kind of a building. If that building wasn't there, and that street and that area wasn't developed for human population, there would be wildland. And that wildland would be sequestering carbon. It would be cleaning the groundwater. It would be cleaning the air. It would be putting nutrients back into the soil. It would be part of this living system that creates benefits for others. So nature is not about zero harm. Nature is about positive benefits. And this is about taking inspiration from those ideas. If we take it into the ideas of products and product design, it's about moving from the current degenerative model, for instance, of built-in obsolescence, where products are designed to be thrown out and not having a very long life cycle, not being repairable, recyclable, upgradable, to getting to 100% recyclable products. So that will be the sustainable version. But actually, if we think about circular economy, recycling is okay, but that's not the top goal. The top goal is to eliminate waste, not just to put it into high energy consuming processes. So how would we redesign products so you don't have to throw it out or not have to put it into recycling, but it can be repaired, it can be modular, it can be upgraded by the users, so you're minimizing waste and eventually eliminating it. And there are many examples of this in the actual business world, whether it is Fairphone that came out of the Netherlands, that has what they call an open modular design. The phone can be upgraded, repaired, improved over time, and you don't throw the whole phone out. You just change the part and you send the part back to Fairphone, and they reuse those technical materials that are in there. To examples like Interface, which have said, we will take inspiration from biomimicry and say, how can our factory behave like a forest? Can it, rather than just get to zero carbon emissions, can it sequester carbon? Can it soak in carbon, hold the carbon? Can it have an approach that puts nutrients in the soil or cools the local area again on hot summer days? Or moving to circularity of materials again, looking at Houdini, which is a garments manufacturer and brand that said, look, let's develop garments that are 100% circular, where the the natural fibers and the synthetic fibers can be separated. They go into their own loops. And we also make all of that technology, all of that knowledge open source so others can build on it. We're not about just changing ourselves and improving market share, but creating an ecosystem of collaboration within the industry. Or examples like Sanergy toilets in Kenya that are restoring nutrient loops by having accessible, affordable toilets in the slums of Nairobi and elsewhere, using the waste from there that they collect, treating it, sanitizing it, and using it back as input into agriculture. So literally creating a circular loop that includes human waste that's treated as a part of it. So these are some of the ideas and that are emerging in the business world on being regenerative. If we then look at examples on the social side, being socially distributive, it's going to be much more about sharing opportunity and value with all who co-created. Now, you're all part of a social enterprise summit, so you're naturally already thinking about these sorts of ideas. You're already in the space of sharing opportunity, sharing value with people and communities, makers, workers, farmers, artisans, I'm sure. So a lot of these ideas will come naturally. But let's think about the idea of going beyond being inclusive. So the divisive economy is one where, for instance, we have traffic jams, or we have poverty wages, where, you know, it's forcing people to live in a very negative way. Inclusive one is about, well, how do we include people in a system that is maybe already broken? So think of it as a bus being stuck in a traffic jam, or think of it as trying to get to a living wage, you know, so that people have at least the essentials that they cover. But what we're saying is, can we go a bit further? Can we go into being distributive, where we have the system starts to be designed to distribute the opportunity to value? If you think about the wages example, for instance, not just the living wage, but can we design businesses so that the profit is also shared, or part of the profit is shared back with workers and artisans and communities and farmers across its supply chain, or across its community more broadly? That would be a distributive model, and we have many examples of that. So again, from the social enterprise world, Creative Handicrafts, based in Mumbai, is a factory that's co-owned by the women workers. They are holding up a sign there saying, I own my fashion factory. And their CEO, Johnny Joseph, is holding up a sign saying, the workers are my boss. So the actual ownership is in the hands of the workers, who then elect the board, who then appoint a CEO. So it's distributive, and the profits are reused for the benefits of the workers in the community. Or other examples of employee ownership models like Richer Sounds, that converted from a private company to being employee owned. Or examples like Airbnb, which has created essentially a version of Airbnb that puts half of the revenue back into the local community, is deliberate about promoting slow tourism to tackle climate change, and is also trying to tackle concentration of wealth by saying, look, there's a limit to how many properties you can list on here. Landlords with huge amounts of property holdings, they can't use this platform to get rich quick. This is not the model for increasing wealth inequality. Or if we look at Lush, for example, another company, they've said, look, we're going to pay the fair share of tax. We're not going to try to minimize our tax bill. We're actually going to deliberately structure ourselves to pay the fair share, because we know that actually that tax is what contributes to education, to healthcare, to policing and security, to infrastructure, all of these things we need as a company. So we shouldn't be trying to minimize. We should try to figure out what the fair share is. And there's something called the fair tax mark that they've subscribed to. By the way, Lush as well is an interesting company. It's a medium-sized, successful commercial company that's also converting into this hybrid model where the workers are co-owning the business with the family that started as a company. So I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to ask you all to just silently consider something. When you look at the Doughnut and the businesses that you're engaged with, maybe just write down briefly what, are some of the ideas for being regenerative and distributive that come up for us. Now, I was going to use Miro for this, but because of the numbers, I think Miro won't quite work. So instead, I'm going to ask you just to use a pen and pad or make a note somewhere on your computer. And then we're going to have a short discussion about this, if that's all right. So I'm going to give a little bit of time for you to do this in silence. But essentially, this is what I'm asking is, if you were to imagine the future economy that your business belongs to, and this might be a business you work in, it might be a business that you set up, it might be a business that you support as an ecosystem player, it might be a business you know well because it's connected to your family or for other reasons. So think of a business and think of it how it belongs to that future economy that is within the donut. Now, ask yourself what the voices that are impacted by this business would say. Imagine they had a seat on the board, or they had an opportunity to really voice their concerns. What would the local community say? What would the forests and rivers say? What would the workers in the supply chain say, if there is a supply chain and it's a products company? What would the air and the soil say, or the direct employees of the work of the business? Or the living planet overall, would they have a voice? Would they have a demand of the business, or the customers or final consumers? What about future generations? What would future generations of people that will be indirectly impacted by this business, what would they say about the decisions being made today? And what would they ask of you if you were to consider things like the business model that you're in, how you share value, how you produce, who your clients are, how you generate income, what you do with that income, how you invest? Think of all of these things, how you operationalize what you're doing. And of course, investors and commercial partners too. And the invitation here is really to think about those most transformative ideas that are maybe not possible right now. They're not commercially feasible. So if it feels like it's easy to do, push yourself harder and say, well, wait a minute, if really the soil was in the room, what would it ask? What would it ask about the way we grow the products in our supply chain, or how we impact climate change? And what would future generations say about, how we design our products, or what services we're doing, and how we're running this company? And then write down some of the biggest ideas. And it might look a bit like this, where you start to identify things that connect to the donut. And I'm going to leave this up for you to think about as well, because the donut's there, and just think, okay, well, on income and work, actually, I could do profit sharing with my employees, or I have a supply chain, and in my supply chain, I could have prices that are paid to suppliers that enable not just a living wage, but double a living wage. Or I'm going to have, because I have products that are really essential for the for the communities. It might be food products, it might be health services, it might be anything like that. Well, actually, I'm going to make it as accessible as possible for those products. I'm going to have nearly zero margin. I'm going to minimize the margin and the cost to the extent possible. Or you might say, I'm going to discontinue particular product lines. There's a company we worked with that actually decided there was a product line that was very negatively impacting nature, and thought, actually, we're going to discontinue this, even though it's very profitable. Or we might move to factories that not only reduce carbon, but actually sequester carbon. What would it look like to partner with others to attract the investment needed to make that a possibility? So think along those sorts of lines. I'm not reading all of these out. And then I'm going to split us up into groups, and hopefully there won't be any hiccups in creating that. But and then we can have a short discussion based on that. So do maybe over the next 3 minutes or 4 minutes, just have some ideas to jot down for you to discuss when we go back. I'm going to see if I can put a timer on to give a sense of it. Okay, I'll stop talking now and leave you in silence for a few. Okay, guys. Before I break you into groups, any questions so far on any of that? I wanted you to start writing this and engaging a little bit before I continued, but yeah, anything at all in terms of comments or questions so far? I'll leave an awkward silence in case somebody wants to jump in. Great. Okay. Well, I'm going to break.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Jump in.
Yeah. Hi,
Thanks,
sorry.
Miranda.
Speak up. Hi, everyone. I'm Miranda. Because actually, I have to leave. I can't stay for too long. So I actually also message you about. I've heard about the donut model. I think it's applicable to all different businesses, but somehow it looks like social enterprise or NGOs, because they are already doing good to our society, right? They are not doing harm at all. So it would be nice to know more about the application or how it can actually help enhance our awareness or some more actions if we are already in a nonprofit or more charity setting. Yeah, so that's why just now I've been thinking about what we can actually do with it. Of course, day to day, we know we're doing a lot of harm to our environment and or to the people, whatever that is. Yeah, so we'd love to share more. Yeah, thanks.
Sure. I mean, I'll give a very general answer, Miranda, to that, because what we are creating is, out of the donut, there is a lot of interest in different arenas to use it. For instance, to transform governments, local governments, or to transform community action, or to transform education or businesses. And we create different tools for different organizations, particularly NGOs, who might find this useful in their work. So it's less about how the NGO can transform itself, but more about in its work with education or local government or national government or businesses or communities, is there an entry point? And what we've done is create tools. And right now you're experiencing a very short taster version of the tool to engage with businesses, because there are many NGOs and other values aligned organizations that are working to engage and transform business. So it's having a better impact on the world. So this is the tool for this. But there are other tools also available at doughuteconomics.org. And if you want to use them, we also, if you're using it with clients or with others, we ask people to register on our website so that it's values aligned organizations that are part of this community of practice. There's no fee to use the tools. Once you've done that, it's so if they are of use and you are engaging city governments or local communities or businesses through this, we just ask you to register, and then you can use the tools and access all the training that we have as well to run workshops and support others by using the tools of Doughnut Economics. So if you all go to the doughuteconomics.org website, there are themes on the right, doughuteconomics.org, and then from those themes you can pick the topic you engage with. You know, cities or business and enterprise or education or communities, for instance, and then from there you can see what's available in the process as well. So I hope that answers the question, and I'm sorry you have to leave. Anyone else? Any other questions for clarification before we break out into groups? All right, I'm going to create 10 groups, so you'll have between 4 to 5 people in each one. If you have, there won't be enough for me to jump in and out of all of them, and I'll give you 15 minutes to just quickly discuss, a couple of minutes each, what came up for you as you asked yourself these questions of being regenerative and distributive. And then when we come back, we'll just ask one person per group just to report back very quickly, 1 point, only 1 point, not summarize everything, because we're going to have 10 groups, so it will be quite a long process if we have many. But we'll have 15-minute discussion. It's going to feel like it's not enough. I'm warning you now. You're going to feel like we're just getting started. We introduced ourselves to each other quickly, and then we started talking. But it's going to be a bit rapid. It's going to be a bit rushed, but a bit of a flavor to share what emerged for you when you really challenge yourself with the business you're thinking about. What are the most transformative ideas that today are not possible, but in the future you want to pursue. So if you have questions, you can leave the breakout room. I'll be in the plenary part of this and I can answer. Or you can invite me in and say, could you jump into our group to clarify something? Very happy to do that, but I'll be waiting in the plenary room. So I will assign. Here we go. 1 second. I'm going to, numbers changed a second ago, so I'm going to make it slightly, I'm going to make it 9 groups to give, or 8 groups actually, between 4 and 5 people. No, 9 groups, between 3 and 4 people. Okay, thanks guys. So one person's report back 1 point when you would come back in 15 minutes. Just to check some of the people that are still here, for instance, Kent and Inky, do you want to jump in onto any of your groups, or you wanted to sit that discussion out? Okay, I'll assume everybody here is not joining the groups, but the groups will have at least 3 people each.
Sorry, I just joined this session because I had a call earlier.
No problem, Inky. So I'll tell you what the instructions are, and then I'll throw you into a group. It's to think about ecologically regenerative and socially distributive ideas. So the most radical, transformative ideas for a business that you know well. It could be a social enterprise that you're connected to, that you're supporting, or you founded, or it could be some other business. So think of a business you know well, and think about what are the most transformative ideas for ecological goals and social goals that are really challenging to pursue, and see if you can identify those ideas. So that's the challenge. I'm going to put you into room 7.
Thank you.
Nettie, I see, is there as well, and Rebecca, I think. The 2 of you, I'm guessing, don't want to be in one of the groups, right? I'm also going to pause the recording and we can unpause it later because there'll be a big blank otherwise. Hello, friends. I'm guessing that felt very rushed. It took a little while to probably get to know each other as well as engage and understand the question. It does take a little while. Normally we spend a lot more time on this exercise to warm it up and engage more deeply. But I hope there was at least one idea that came out of someone in the group about the kind of practices, the kind of ideas that a business can pursue in pursuit of circularity, biomimicry, or fairness and equality in some form on social or ecological grounds. So I'm just going to ask people to share from the different groups. Does a group want to go first? Is there one that's sort of ready with, yes, we had one idea actually that fits this regenerative and distributive model? If not, I'm going to, yes, Raymond, wonderful.
Hi, so actually I'm representing group 2. So our group, long story short, first of all, is about subscription model. That is about, like, rather than ownership, like we focus on the values. So kind of reduce the waste, and I think it will be fitting the Doughnut economy. On the other hand, it's more about education. So educating the staff about the importance of regenerative economics, as well as the education of consumer regarding their mindset change. So that's all from my side. Thank you.
That is fantastic, Raymond. Exactly the kinds of ideas that we want to, spawn is that maybe we're currently producing things, but we instead maybe we need to rent them rather than sell them, and have a subscription model where we repair the products rather than keep selling new products to people. So that's fantastic. Sunny, yes.
Okay, I'm representing the group 3, and actually it's a real business case in Shanghai already, and it's a sweater company. One thing is they kind of like responsible sourcing. They sourcing from the very good material and also responsible one. And the secondly is through the manufacturing process, they actually have the transparency in their supply chain. They actually measure the carbon emissions. And so that's why the sweater, you can really check the carbon emissions of certain one. And then the third thing is that actually the sweater, you can actually use the washing machines to wash. So then to reduce the consumption when you're using that, you don't need to dry clean it. And another thing is actually you can wear that sweater not only in the winter time, you also can wear that in the summertime because of the function they design. And the last thing, the best, is actually they have the one product which is made by the recycled woolen. So from the existing woolen, they kind of trying to make it into the new sweaters. And so I think that's a very good business case already. But I think the best thing is it's not very popular because it's very expensive and it's not well accepted in China right now. But they really try to do almost everything good for the planet.
That's fantastic, Sunny. And I think that the point there that really resonates for me is that you're doing something currently that is very difficult in the current market. As you say, it's expensive, it's above a price point. And as Raymond also mentioned, the consumer awareness is so important, and that's still coming, and we're investing into that, a lot of us in this sector, but that's still coming. So you're ahead of your time with that what you describe with the multitude of circular kind of philosophies that are integrated in that, including recycled wool and multi-use and reduce the washing needs, as well as like the traceability of carbon emissions throughout. All that's fantastic. But what we're doing, as you perfectly explained, is we're envisioning a future, and we're thinking, what is the idea that belongs to that future? Because the rest of the economy has to follow. This is not a luxury; it's a must-have. So that's wonderful to hear. I'm going to leave it open for the next group to jump in. I guess we're going by order. So Raymond and Sunny did a great job going, room 2 to room 3, and now let's move to room 4, which was Alan, Danny, and Raymond Poon.
Yes, I'm from group 4. Actually, we don't have much time to discuss. Have some concrete examples or ideas that come out. But I can share my own experience in short. I found a social enterprise myself, which is doing providing design business to commercial design sectors, and I hire people with different disabilities, which designers with disabilities, and we're actually empowering them to a certain extent to gain more income. Well, this is what I'm currently doing, and well, maybe it's just a simple example or sharing from our group. Yeah, group 4.
Absolutely, Alan, and that raising income is so important. I mean, it's going to, and we're going to need lots of new strategies and new business models to do that. So that's another fantastic one. I think group 5, Vicky, have you already unmuted and ready to share? Is it Vicky or Doris or Aisha or Present Living Hong Kong? Any of those that want to share one idea?
Vicky, you can.
Well, Doris, do you want to share on behalf of the group any idea that emerged that you feel is worth sharing? Not all of them, of course.
Actually, in our discussion, we just have debate on how to treat with the mass production on the agriculture, and then some teammates they suggest to have the bioengineering kind of agriculture, maybe indoor one with the machine, that kind of agriculture. But someone said, oh no, they consume a lot of energy, so it's not the solution. It's not creating a new impact. So that is the debate between two sides on that. Yeah.
That's a really worthwhile debate, and you're right. There are different visions for these ideas, and we're not prescriptive about it, but we're just saying which would be the idea that is working with and within the cycles of the living world when we're thinking about the future. And what's its social impact, both for affordable food, but also for livelihoods connected to that food, because we know that agriculture is such an important part of the economy for livelihoods too. So there are so many things to consider in that technological route versus maybe agroecology, which is maybe what was the alternative idea that was emerging in that group. So thank you, Doris, for sharing. Room 6, that's Anna, Andrea, Tracy. Any of you want to share?
Hello, this is Tracy from Group 6. It was mainly Andrea and I talking because our mics are working. Andrea is from London, and the previous company she worked in is a fast-moving consumer goods company, which manufactures like detergents and other cleaning products. And mine is a social enterprise fostering a sense of nature connection between people. And we have a long discussion actually about the incentive of why business would want to adopt this thinking of this donut economies. And we are actually interested in knowing more because I think Andrea, her company was one with a social-minded leader. So the previous CEO tries to ensure that people can afford the products that they need, so setting at reasonable prices. And also she believes that if the company culture is valuing the livelihood and also environmental sustainability, actually it attracts the people with the social-minded, like the right talents to work for this company. So a good company culture attracts the people who are sharing the sustainability mindset. But I spent a lot of time talking and discussing with Andrea about how to make the leader in the company to have this mindset. So we talk about how to connect them with nature, or how to make them maybe see the suffering of people or the environment, so that they actually move the first step of having this mindset and then moving to the how of doing the or following the donuts economy. Yeah.
That's fantastic, Tracy. Thank you. The next exercise is going to be really relevant to the discussion you just had with Andrea, because we're going to ask the question, not just how do we rely on the leadership to do this, but how do we create a design of the company, the organizational structure, the ownership model, the board structure, the purpose behind the company, decision-making models, the financial incentives and parameters. We're going to ask ourselves a little bit about how do we design these so that they help the leader to do this and help other decision makers to focus on social and ecological goals. So it's going to build a little bit on what you just covered. That's wonderful. Let's move to room 7. So that's Amon, Bob, Inky, and Steve. Any of you want to share one of the ideas?
Hello, my name is Amon. From what we have discussed in the book of our roommate Bob share his friends or his one of the amazing business idea is about how to use a very healthy food to create, how to manufacturing some food that is healthy for people who have some diabetes or have a long-term chronic disease, which cannot consume too much sugar or other tasty food. And I think they have found a way to manufacturing something that is very healthy and very suitable for them, even and so that they can taste food normally. I think it's quite a great idea, but I think one of the drawback is that of course the cost is very high, which may not be affordable for anyone, especially for elderly. And I think that one of the things that may be to lower the cost is to education. So I think maybe they can share the skills. Of course, it's one of the business confidential, but I think maybe they can share the skills so that more people can aware of this technology, so that more people can be benefited from this skills.
That's fantastic, and indeed the way we design our I guess the products here, which is the food, the way it's developed, the way it's marketed, the way it's priced, is going to be critical, and those are exactly the kinds of ideas to look at when we look at social benefit. So that's wonderful. Thank you for that, Amon. Group 8, I think, is there an agreement on who will be? Yes, it's Jasmine, right?
Yeah. Hi.
Jasmine.
Hi there. So group 8. So we actually have a long debate on problem statement itself. So it's a problem that consists of global food crisis in terms of accessibility, factory farming, and also youth demotivation problem. So what we're trying to come up with some solutions. So we were talking about having an open data source. So such a big global data platform that is accessible and transparent to everyone, to be able to see and track how food is being distributed. And also it's kind of like disclosing what's happening within the industry, the supply chain. So for making the data accessible itself to the public, it kind of add on the pressure on the business sectors, on the suppliers, and also consumer. So they will be able to understand what kind of food they are consuming, what kind of impact they're making, and how the decision maker from different government or business can be able to distribute the food to places that need the food the most, from places that actually we already have excessive food. So I think this is what our group have been talking about, and to involve youth to empower them. So actually kind of endorsing the World Food Program, which they have something like a food entrepreneurship program and also forum for youth to get in touch. So that's how our group have been coming up with to combine, come up with a solution to try to tackle different things that we care about. Thank you very much.
That's wonderful. And that definitely makes a lot of sense in terms of redesigning the business model. Thank you, Jasmine. Group 9 or room 9, last but not least. Stephen, CC, SES host.
Hello.
Hi,
Maybe I
Cece.
can share.
Yeah.
Because our group mostly came from a non-profit background, so it's not really a business model. So we are thinking of how, as a charity or non-profit sector, also contribute to this. So we are thinking of two ideas, which is firstly, maybe some NGO or NPO may need to work with some contractor or vendor. So maybe in terms of screening of the partnership, maybe we need to put in sustainability as a screening criteria. And the second one is for NGO, they for their operation or for their, maybe they also have supply chain or yeah. So see how can they practice the green practice within their operation. Yeah. And we also think of if in a business setting, maybe in terms of HR, we can also take care of the well-being of the employee and maybe practice DEI so that we can provide more employment opportunity for the underprivileged people. Yeah, I think that's what we have discussed.
That sounds actually very relevant, CC, for if you were a business as well, because it's the same decisions around who you partner with, who your clients are, who your commercial partners are, and who's in your supply chain. These decisions that are often difficult and have very strong commercial pull as well as ethical or sustainability related pull as well on them. So thank you. Does anyone want to offer any reflections or ideas on the back of what you heard? I want to leave a little space in case anyone wants to come in with any reflections, comments, or questions at this point before we move on to the last part of the workshop. No. All right, let's move forward then. I'm going to share my screen, and what we're going to do is move on to the second part. And what we're doing currently, by the way, this is called the Doughnut Design for Business workshop, and we're doing the taster version. So this is a very sped up, very quick version of the workshop, just to give a sense of what it's like to use these tools. And everything I'm presenting is available online. I'm going to share the links and show you where it is at the end of this session, but all the materials are there. So if you feel like you want to go deeper, you can do it internally with your organization, with your local community of social entrepreneurs or others. It's all available, and I'll talk you through that very shortly at the end as well. So let's now move on to the last bit. I'm going to present for the next 10 to 12 minutes or so, so get comfortable. What we've done is we have essentially come up with some ideas that will be based on being regenerative, ecologically regenerative, and socially distributive. And as you heard, they have particular underpinnings, because that's how we're going to help get within the ecological ceiling and the planet's boundaries. And that's how we're going to help get and meet all the social foundation, all the needs of everybody on the planet. With that in mind, we now need to ask, well, how do these come about? What is it that allows businesses of any kind to do these things? And what is it that is stopping businesses doing these things? And there are many people that would realize, actually, we need to transform business. If we want it to behave in these ways, we want it to move towards these sorts of strategies. It's a really big jump, to go from the linear model to circular models. If we want to go from, very much poverty wages to living wage and beyond, if we want to move into new forms of manufacturing, new forms of product design, new relationships with stakeholders, then this is a new transformation in the business world. And what we can do, of course, is think about it as, you know, there are lots of ways we can transform businesses. We can exert public pressure, or we can have regulations, and we can have collective bargaining by workers or farmers, or have consumer pressure, or even investor pressure. So there is a route of transforming business through pressure, through public pressure, including government regulation. There's, of course, a route that was already mentioned about working through enlightened leadership, you know, leaders at the top of businesses that are trying to do the right thing, trying to transition and transform their own businesses. There's a route of setting better targets, better metrics, quantifying the goals and objectives more effectively. There's a route of making the business case as well, sort of saying to companies, look, you know, you will have a social license to operate if you can do this. This is the future economy that we are transitioning to. If you want to be a part of it, this is how you will belong to that economy. All of these are very effective routes. Lots of organizations are working on new regulations, or improving leadership, or setting metrics for companies, or helping them make the business case. These are all great, but it's not what Doughnut Economics focuses on. We want to reinforce these and drive even further ambition. So we are focusing on something called transforming the deep design of business. I'll define that in a second, but essentially there's a couple of reasons why. One is that if we have companies that are purely about extraction of profit, then they will fight the regulations, they will undermine them, or look for loopholes. If we have companies that have ownership models and governance structures that are not focused on this, then they will hold back those enlightened leaders. They will not let them take it forward. In fact, maybe they won't hire them, or they will fire those people that push too much in terms of their leadership. If we have companies that are setting targets that are ambitious, but they're not actually changing how they do business, which is the reality, by the way. If we look at a lot of the very ambitious climate targets companies made, the transition in the actual operations of the business is not happening to meet those targets. The targets are big, but the business is stuck in the old way of doing things. And making the business case can be limited as well by companies that are very much based on narrow financial metrics rather than holistic, broader metrics. So we think if we can help to change the design of business, we can make all of these other leverage points on companies more effective as well. Now, let me give you a couple of examples of how the design of business holds back action. So we've worked in lots of industries. In fact, we did this workshop, a version of this workshop now with over 500 companies. And what we heard was in the tea industry, for instance, that, look, we want to pay a living wage, right? But paying tea pluckers a living wage cannot mean paying our suppliers more for their tea. This market just won't reward this. They need to fund it by raising productivity of the farmers. We talked to one of the world's leading brands and companies that has created some very effective and high achieving sort of goals for carbon and climate. And to meet their climate targets, it's very clear they will need to transition from single-use packaging to multiple use. And what they told us is we should introduce refillable perfume bottles, but bringing consumers on board needs investment, and the payback period on that capital expenditure is too long. And then we spoke to someone who's the head of innovation in a major clothing brand, who told us, look, I've been asked to create a range of regenerative clothing while being expected to deliver the usual 15% profit margins from the outset. This is impossible. Overall, what we're seeing is that the design of companies is sometimes holding back commercially viable strategies. It is possible for all these companies to take the action that is suggested in these quotes, but they are limited by their financial structures, and their financial structures are limited by their organizational design. So what we say is essentially, let's look inside the deep design of business. And to do this, we use the framework generated by the author and thought leader Marjorie Kelly, who says, let's look at the purpose of the company, why it exists and what its business model is. Let's look at the networks of the company. Let's look at, you know, those relationships around the networks with suppliers and communities and governments and competitors. let's look at the governance structure, how the company is governed and for whose benefit. Let's look at the ownership model of the business, how it's owned and how this relates to what's possible. And finally, let's look at the financial structure of the business and what finance and investment demands of it. And essentially, how do we move away from that last century, 20th century version of the company that is based around the optimization or scarcity of financial capital that says how much financial value can we extract through this enterprise? That's the way we designed companies last century. To moving to the 21st century, the new version of design, which is saying how many benefits can we generate through this enterprise? Now, as people involved in social enterprise, of course, you are very much on this, how many benefits can we generate through this enterprise way of thinking? But the invitation here is also to go a step further, and let's think about how we are designing companies to pursue that idea. So I'm going to give some examples from around the world. Some are social enterprises, most are not, but there's something interesting in the design of the company that's worth highlighting. So if we look at profit-driven businesses, of course, so much of chocolate, coffee, global supply chains are dominated by companies that are, focused on extracting maximum profits. But in contrast to this, a company emerged out of the Netherlands that said, look, let's make 100% slave-free the norm in chocolate. There's a lot of slave labor, child labor in the cocoa industry in particular. And they said, let's create, a 100% slave-free version of this. They didn't just say it, they put it into practice. So they started having long-term relationships with their buyers. They started paying above even the fair trade minimum price and much above the market price for cocoa so that the farmers are not stuck in poverty. But they didn't just stop at what they're doing. They locked that in. They said, look, we know that we have investors. We know that the company will evolve over time. We're going to create a group of guardian shareholders that have a special share that can make sure that we don't move away from the purpose of the company. Now, those shareholders will not have an economic interest. They don't get dividends, but they will have an ability to make sure we have a lock on our mission. So they called it a mission lock. Next, we can move to networks. And here it's about how do we move from those extractive relationships with all the different stakeholders, including government, including the rest of the industry, for instance, through regressive or backward lobby groups in the business world, to more collaborative partnerships, like, for instance, the company El Puente, which was created to benefit artisans, farmers, and workers around the world. And what's interesting about El Puente is when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, rather than canceling orders or renegotiating prices, which is what the majority of the broader industry did, they instead doubled down on their commitment. So they paid upfront to their suppliers, even though the suppliers didn't know, when they can open up their workshops to create the products to sell to El Puente. The reason that they were able to double down and really create these long-term partnerships, one of the reasons is they had their suppliers represented on their board. So there's actually a board member that says, look, I'm here to represent the interests of these suppliers. And he could immediately bring up issues of cash flow, issues around sort of operations that are happening around the world, because he was in touch with all of those suppliers of El Puente and could represent their voice in the board. Next, we look at governance. And here is the governance in service of finance, or is it serving the purpose of the company? So when we look at boardrooms, for instance, who is represented on the board? Not just who is considered, but who is represented. And an interesting example is the private company, Faith in Nature, that said that we are the first company in the world to give nature a voice and a vote, but we won't be the last. Now, the reason this is interesting is what they did is they got the organization, Lawyers for Nature, as a board member. They said, look, sit on our board and represent nature on our board. And through that, it changed the dynamic of the governance. So that board member had a vote and a voice and would raise issues in relation to the environment. And they were independent. They weren't from inside the company. They could really be a bit tougher and be a bit more direct in what they ask for. And there are, of course, many other examples of this now emerging. Next is ownership. So the way the company is owned, and of course, there are so many models of ownership, but some of the really interesting emerging models include steward ownership. And an example of a company building on steward ownership is what Patagonia did. So Patagonia made headlines about a year ago, just over a year ago, and said, we are first company in the world to make Earth the only shareholder of the company. And the way they did that is they essentially said, we're going to have two kinds of share classes. We're going to have one share class that has all of the dividend rights, but none of the voting rights, and another share class that has all of the voting rights, but none of the dividend rights. So they separated money and power in the ownership structure. So those that get the surplus of the company, what profits it generates, well, that organization cannot pressure the company to make more profits. It doesn't have a vote. And those that do have a vote don't have an economic interest in the company. They only are there to make sure it's focused on its purpose. So it's ownership model locked in the purpose and made sure that the management and decisions of Patagonia are focused on the social and ecological goals, not on short-term increases in profit and margins. And lastly, let's look at finance. And finance is, of course, about lots of things. It can really unlock things. I mean, one of the partnerships that I was privy to and I engaged with was this one between the Body Shop and the social enterprise that was working in India called Plastics for Change. And Plastics for Change was basically helping waste pickers in India to become organized and to give them much better conditions in order for the waste that they pick up to become recycled to go into the supply chain for Body Shop's packaging. Now, what was interesting is that the financial model the Body Shop applied had a much broader consideration of value. It wasn't just financial value. And as a result, they could be much more patient with their investment into the partnership and their expectations of margins and commercial goals. Now, this raises other questions around, look, is finance, can we reshape finance? Can we have a cap on dividends so that investors get a certain amount, but after that amount, we put the rest of the profit into the purpose of the company, into unlocking ideas? Can we have maybe a fund that is allowing for investment into low margin, low profit ideas that are very high impact for society and planet? And when I do these workshops with lots of larger companies, often the big ideas they generate, they're going to be low margin. And as a result, they need an ability to invest into those ideas and to pursue those ideas, even if the profits are low. It's still profitable. They're not making a loss, but the profits are lower as a result. So thinking about those sort of things in finance. And just to summarize, I mean, the benefits of redesign are plentiful. So it's aligning the purpose of the company across the business, across product design, across the financial department, across procurement, across marketing, sales. You can do that through the design of the company. It's also about enabling partnerships. So you can have deeper partnerships with the supply chain, make them a part of the company's design somehow, a voice in the governance, co-ownership model. So they own some of the shares in some way, making more than just transactional relationships. You can help unlock investment, so it can channel investment. So if you design the financial structure in a way that allows for reinvestment in the company rather than 100% of profits always going for dividends to external investors, you can unlock what's needed to pursue some of these ideas. And of course, it can help to protect the company's mission over time. You might have a very benevolent owner, a very benevolent manager, or a founder that's doing great things, and he or she is kind of really ethically steering things, and that's wonderful. But long term, that person may or may not be in control of the company. Things happen, things change. And also, it doesn't need to sit on the shoulders of one ethical individual driving the change from above. How do we reinforce those values, that mission, that legacy through the design of the company, through its governance structure, through its ownership model, through other aspects of it? And lastly, it's of course to become regenerative and distributive by design. If we're going to unlock these ideas, then we need to design companies deliberately to be focused on unlocking these kinds of ideas that you've already begun to generate. So the next exercise is going to be this, and what we're going to ask you is essentially, and I'm going to share the Miro, so I'm going to give you a link in a second. You can use the Miro if you like, if you're comfortable using Miro. I've created a sort of cluster of groups for you to use after we do this exercise individually. You might need to quickly sign into Miro to do that. It's free, but if you're not comfortable with Miro, that's fine as well. You can do this on a piece of paper. You can do this on your computer separately and just write this up. I mean, this is not a complicated framework to use. But what we're going to do is put at the top of it 1 or 2 ideas that are as transformative as possible that you already thought about, or maybe bigger ones you thought about since the last discussion for your business. And you're going to ask yourself, which aspects of the design of that company or organization is holding back ideas like this? And how can the design change to unlock these sorts of ideas? And here, let me give you an example. So for instance, if we put at the top here, the different ideas that they come up with, and let's put 3 of them up. So suddenly we go from paying the market price to suppliers to saying, let's pay prices to suppliers that have been calculated to allow the suppliers to pay their workers a double of a living wage. Huge idea, right? It's going to have financial implications, it's going to have implications on the relationship with suppliers and the supply chain. What if they want to also do factories that sequester carbon? So where they're manufacturing, look, we're going to have to retrofit these, we're going to need investment into these. Investment's going to be slow in giving us returns because the idea is a little bit ahead of its time, but we want to pursue it. Thirdly, they might want to say, look, we're only going to use life-friendly chemistry, say for their packaging. And there they are deliberately redesigning the packaging to make sure that any of the ingredients in there is deliberately life-friendly, and they get rid of things that are synthetic or going to be harmful for the environment. And for this company, I won't read all of them, but one or two of the things that might be holding them back, for instance, is on networks. Well, their relationships with suppliers really just focus on low prices, and there is a lack of long-term commitment that is needed for that deep partnership. So short-term contracts, and it's really focused on price. It's quite rigid with price. Another thing that maybe is holding it back, if we jump to governance, is only the investors are represented on the board. There's no voice for impacted stakeholders. Maybe there is director level or executive level staff of the company that also come to the board or sit on the board, but they don't represent those stakeholders. They can bring in perspectives of what their observations are, but they represent the company. They work for the company. So there is a lack of representation. And maybe if we jump to finance on the left, you might see, look, there are very high margin goals and high dividend goals. And this really does limit some of the ideas and actions where there will be low margins or low returns. But then let's jump over to the right side. How could they address these? Well, maybe they have long-term commitment with prices to enable cost of sustainable production. So their relationship with suppliers starts to say, look, we're going to make you a 10-year contract, and that 10-year contract will say we're going to increase the price to cover the cost of sustainable production. Or for their governance, maybe they say, look, we want to have some employees on our board, but also we want some of the supply chain represented on our board. And maybe that's a little bit advanced, so they don't want to jump straight into this. So they can start with an observer seat, so non-voting seat on the board that can rotate for the 5 biggest suppliers. So every year, different suppliers are represented from their 5 biggest, most important strategic relationships in their supply chain. And then lastly, they can have a margin and capital investment requirement that's lower for the biggest social ecological ideas. So they can have a process for saying, what are the biggest ideas that the staff can generate here? And for the biggest ones that come out, the most impactful ones, we're going to actually apply lower financial parameters to greenlight that strategy, or to unlock that strategy. So I hope that makes sense. That's what you don't have to do all of it. You might just think of one idea at the top, one thing on the left that is holding back ideas like this, and one thing on the right that can change in the design of this company that will help unlock ideas like this. Now, I'm going to share my screen to show you what the Miro looks like. So you can do this on the Miro if you like. And I'm going to share the link to the Miro in a second, but before we jump in there, let me just show you. So what I've done is like group 2, because we reallocated group 1. You can have up to 4 people from there. Each can write their name at the top of who they are. They can then say, look, at the top here, I'm going to think of the biggest ideas, and you can do that through some of these blue ones. You can pull that up and put it right at the top like this. You can zoom in, and by zooming, you just scroll basically I'm pinching on my slide, but you can zoom in using your functionality, and you can write the idea here. So for instance, if we think of the subscription model that Raymond shared in group 2, right? And Raymond and others do rewrite this, if you like, all main products. You might put that there. You can make it bigger if you like as well, by just script. And then you might think, okay, well, what's going to be a thing that is holding back an idea like this? So you take one of the reds and you put it in here, and you go, okay, well, finance. That's going to need investment into awareness raising. There might be other things as well that's needed. And then you might think, well, what can we do to unlock that investment? Well, actually, maybe we will say something like 10% of, let me make it a bit bigger, of profits invested into this transition. Could be bigger. 10% is pretty low. Could be 30, for instance. And you can just make it bigger and smaller. So what you're doing essentially is to do this, and then you might think, okay, then lastly, is there one action you can take? And you can put that one action down around, okay, well, let's start a process to begin that. So I am going to, I'll take these back off your one, Raymond and group 2. But any questions so far? And there's group 3, sorry, for the typo. Group 4, group 5, etc. So I'll fix that in a second. You can work on just one if you want. If you just want to work on Raymond's one, that's fine. Or if everyone wants to do their own one, that's fine too. So there's space there for you to do that. What I'm going to do is put you back into the group. Oh yes, Sunny, you've got a question. Wonderful. What's the question?
The question regarding to the previous example you give us is that we have they need a huge investment on educating our clients, and then we have to allocate 30% of profit on that. We already have no money at all. So how can we maybe doing other things like partner with other people, so we do the networking and using that to kind of conquer the problems we are having or obstacle that block us.
Absolutely. I mean, the idea here was very crude, right? The one I mentioned was these are not one size fits all. I was just speculating, for the company. So absolutely, that's exactly the kind of more sophisticated version you might come up with, because your context, your partners. It might be that you bring in a new investment round for this that has a certain aspect of the term sheet with the investors that is facilitating. It might be something else, but the invitation is for you to design what makes sense for you. So probably you won't use any of the ideas that I just gave you as an example. Like those are from different businesses, they're from different contexts, and each of you has a different context. So I'm going to, any other questions before I open the groups again? And we're going to spend 15 minutes. So again, the idea is you can do it for different ones, but maybe because we're short on time, you can also do it on just one of the companies collectively in your group. So you can just do one of the canvases. It's really up to you. If there aren't other questions, I'm going to reopen the same groups for the same discussions, and we'll go from there. Some of you only have 2 people in your group right now, and I hope that's okay. You might have a more advanced conversation actually as a result. Again, pull me in or request I join in, or you can jump out, and I'll be waiting the plenary as well if you have any questions. So I'll put 15 minutes on the clock, and I'm opening the rooms right now. Yes. Oh, sorry. I will share. Let me close the rooms because I did not share. Apologies. I did not share the actual link to the mirror. Let me do that. And my computer's found a very bad time to freeze. Apologies. Sorry, the page is just reloading. In the meantime, if there are any questions, do let me know. I can answer while it reloads. Okay, here we are. Okay. Here's the Miro link. You don't have to use it. You can do it on a piece of paper if you want separately as well. The important thing is to come up with one change that you might want to pursue, identify one thing that is holding back ideas like this. So I'm reopening now. I'm pasting the link again in case anyone didn't see it the first time. Hopefully it's all very clear. Thanks. Well, thank you guys for going through this. I know it must have felt very rushed, that we didn't quite have enough time at the end to go through all the details. So this was a taster. It was a way to start those conversations about what are the biggest ideas, and also the second conversation, which is often ignored, around are there things we can do in the design of the company, the ownership, the financial parameters, the relation with investors, the board structure. Is there something we can do that will be helpful to these sorts of ideas? That question is so critical. So I wanted to just thank you for bearing with us. Hopefully you got a little bit of a taste for what the approach of Doughnut Economics is. And I just want to show you a couple of things on our website in the final 2 minutes, so you know where to find further information. So if you go to, for instance, themes and business and enterprise, what you will find is that all of the information that we talk about is here. We have a video that goes through the content of this again, if you want to watch the conceptual explanation that I did very quickly today. It's available there for you to use. We have 2 versions of this workshop. We have the core version, which is longer, and the taster version, which is what you did today. And then we have also some information for policymakers on how they can engage with these alternative enterprise designs, and also for business schools and business education. If you go into the core tool, you can get all the information here, and you can go straight into the actual tool itself to get all the slides, the canvases, the link to the Miro, so you can create your own online workshop, or you can get the PDFs of these as well to do it offline. So I want to just make sure that you can all access all of this, because this is in the public domain. If you're a business individually, you want to do an internal reflection, this is open and free for you to use to run an internal workshop. This is for the long workshop. All the information is here, all the different examples, and there's some guidance at the end as well for how to do this. I'm also going to show you, if you are an organization like an NGO or a consultancy or some sort of ecosystem actor, impact hub, etc., you can register with Organizations in Action, and there are many of them on Doughnut Economics website. We can see them in map format here as well. You can see we don't have a lot in Asia. We have a lot currently. There's a little bit in Malaysia and Australia. There's a lot in Europe, Western Europe in particular, that are doing this. And if you want to be one of them, one of those organizations, you can fill out an application form so that you can then use these tools with your own work with clients or with members or with businesses and communities you work with. So it's all there on doughuteconomics.org. I hope that some of you will sign up as practitioners, as facilitators to use this. And these are some of the organizations that we have currently that are from around the world that are using this. So thank you for joining the workshop, and I hope it was a fulfilling exercise for all of you. Thank you.